This computer, amazing. Oops, sorry. Let me just present this. All right. Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us for our second section of the Take Action event that we have today in partnership with ISACA South Florida, Air Ventures, and of course, Tech Hub South Florida. And that's actually who I'm representing today. So this is me with darker hair 2 years ago. So I do need an updated headshot. But I'm really excited to introduce our speaker as well, Darnelle Daverman, who is with New Horizons South Florida, one of our new members this year. We're super excited to hear what she has to say. Before we get started, I also wanted to introduce our ASL interpreter, Beth Wagmeister, who's here. And she also has someone joining her as well to kind of just sub in and join the force here. And thank you to our sponsors, ISACA, Mission Staff, BizEdge, Sim South Florida. And yeah, these are just a few of our speakers for today. And actually, Darnelle, you're on here, so we're super excited for this. And just so everybody knows, we do have workshops all day, and we are recording these. So we will be sharing with all the attendees. And if you have friends and family who were not able to attend this discussion, please go ahead and share it with them as well. Awesome. And just a reminder, there is a Ready Challenge that is hosted by Air Ventures. And the purpose of this is to inspire tech innovation and entrepreneurship while just really pursuing equity and just the regional growth in general. So if you want to check out readychallenge.org, feel free to do so, take the survey, and you're actually eligible for some cash prizes as well. All right, so now I'm just going to hand it over to, one second, let me just exit my screen here. I'm going to hand it over to you, Darnelle. You can go ahead and share your screen. This is being recorded, so I'm excited to hear what you have to say.
All right, can you see my screen? Hopefully I'm sharing the right screen here. That says soft skills and emotional intelligence, yes?
Yep.
Awesome, let me minimize this. All right, so good morning, everyone. It's my pleasure to be here today. Thank you so much for hosting this much needed forum and topic of discussion. It's super duper important in the job marketplace to understand soft skills and emotional intelligence and how to apply it. Again, my name is Darnelle Daverman Vasquez. I am the Director of Career and Student Services with New Horizons South Florida. So hopefully you can see my next screen. I just want to make sure I'm on the right screen. Can you see the next screen with my curly hair there? Are you able to see that, guys?
Yep, it's perfect.
Perfect. Okay. So, New Horizons of South Florida is the top training and certification provider in the U.S. We're also in the Caribbean and several other continents. So that's a big bonus there. And I've been in this industry for the past 12 years, always working as career services or student services. And my main responsibility is for onboarding our new students, making sure they have the support and resources that they need so that when they complete the program, they are career ready. They're able to start their careers in whatever field that they studied in. And when it comes to career placement specifically, some of the things that we focus on heavily is not only just, the job search strategies, especially in this day and age, things are just different. Everything is virtual, to resume writing and making that great first impression, but to interviewing as well and making that great impression enough to land you the job or second interview, third interview, or what have you, but making sure that you're a viable candidate for the opportunity. And so that's kind of where we're going to lead when it comes to emotional intelligence and soft skills, is honing in on, how to transition and relay all that of who you are during an interview. All right. So hopefully the objectives that we're going to try to obtain today, and I will say this, there's a couple of parts in here, this is just educator of me. So first and foremost, we want to define and identify the key competencies of emotional intelligence. What is emotional intelligence? How do you know you have it or don't, or how can you increase your awareness of it? Then we want to be able to gain better control over our behaviors, especially under duress, under stressful situations, especially as it relates to an interview or in the workplace. We want to learn about navigating through those unconscious biases that we have and others have. And then finally, being able to demonstrate emotional intelligence in an interview setting. So let's start with that. Emotional intelligence, let's define it. Emotional intelligence refers to the ability to identify and manage one's own emotions, but it takes it a step further. And it's not just about managing your own emotions, but actually the emotions of others, right? So it's interesting that for the most part, we've been taught you can't control other people's emotions and feelings. Well, emotional intelligence basically begs to differ. You can't help manage other people's emotions. But the key parts in that I bolded here is being able to manage your emotions, identify what you're feeling, be able to focus on that, harness those emotions, and then apply them to tasks like thinking and problem solving and basically getting through that stressful situation that you're undergoing. When it comes to unconscious bias, and what is that, and also referred to as implicit bias, it's often defined as a prejudice or unsupported judgments in favor or against one thing, person, group, as compared to another in a way that is usually considered unfair. Now, when it comes to unconscious bias, you can actually use that to your advantage when you're interviewing, and we'll talk a little bit about that a little bit later on. Now, just a little bit of history when it comes to emotional intelligence. It started way back in 1985 with Wayne Payne when he coined emotional intelligence in one of his theses. And then later on, John Mayer developed a discipline in the world. And it wasn't until Daniel Goleman really helped it to gain a worldwide recognition when he published his book, Emotional Intelligence. And basically, he was able to help the world understand the value of emotional intelligence and even how to measure that. So according to Goleman, emotional intelligence is demonstrated through greater personal or social emotional competencies. So it's important to have an emotional vocabulary. And when I say emotional vocabulary, it's just being able to identify what you're feeling, are you angry? Are you anxious? Are you fearful? It is basically able, and that's how you're going to be able to transition to the next thing, is identifying what it is you're feeling. So it starts with having emotional vocabulary and understanding and managing your feelings or moods, comprehending the emotions of others and understanding unconscious bias, communicating and engaging others, understanding unconscious bias, and ultimately helping you to build strong networks and relationships and pass that interview. So the importance of emotional intelligence, primarily it helps you to, just what the previous slide said, is about building those networks and those relationships, longstanding friendships. But it's about mainly managing your own mood and emotions. It's controlling your impulses. It helps you to be able to navigate through certain stressful or high-driven, anxiety-driven conversations. You end up learning about others. You learn to be able to problem solve, and again, just build strong networks, and basically better manage stress in challenging situations. I don't know about you, but I would love to be able to go through life stress-free. So it's important to learn and understand emotional intelligence and be able to apply it in your everyday life, whether, in your family situations, your business situations, work situations. It's something that you can use in all walks of life. emotional intelligence. Now, the key to emotional intelligence is care, compassion, and empathy. The application of high emotional competence also requires the ability to genuinely care for others while demonstrating compassion and empathy. Keyword, genuinely care for others while demonstrating compassion and empathy. Now, when it comes to unconscious bias, I like this. I saw this online and I just loved it. The acronym FLEX, right? Focus within, which is tuning into your emotions. And all that is part of emotional intelligence, recognizing how your experience has shaped your perspectives. Stick to the facts and don't make assumptions, because that aligns with prejudice, right? And turn your frustration into curiosity. I like to ask questions rather than just to assume that I know the answer personally. So learn about others, engage in dialogue, expand your options. So anyways, this is just some key words here to help you understand a little bit and be able to navigate through some of those unconscious bias that we have. Back to emotional intelligence and Goleman, there's certain key concepts when it comes to emotional intelligence. The first and primary is self-awareness. Know thyself, know what you're feeling, identify it. So once you're able to identify it, you're most likely able to regulate and manage it so that you have the social skills to be able to be in a social, environment and navigate through that. Show empathy and have the motivation and the passion to continue through failures or hard situations and just keep trucking on, if you will. But the first and primary step is self-awareness. So we'll start there. Self-awareness. Self-awareness is basically your ability to understand your emotions, moods, and general energy levels and what drives them. An individual must become self-aware before they can start to understand others, right? So if you can't understand yourself, how are you going to understand someone else? So that's the first key, is to be okay with exploring your feelings and exploring your moods and being aware, hey, I am feeling X. The second part of it is being able to not only identify, or once you've identified that, you're angry, sad, excited, frustrated, nervous, fearful, whatever those words are, then you're going to be able to manage those emotions and responses and choose the best behavior in any context. And of course, this could be very difficult, to do when, either your expectations haven't been met, or whatever's in the actual environment, the context that's going on, whatever's going on to drive those emotions. As if it's a very high fueled environment at the moment, it's going to be difficult to manage, but clearly not impossible. Or if someone is, criticizing you or criticizing your work, that could be an emotionally fueled conversation or environment at the time. So, but it's not impossible. It could be difficult. The third is, we talked about that a little bit, is the motivation, right? It's just having that thing inside of you to keep powering through. It's your ability to motivate yourself even when you failed, even when you're disappointed, or when you're hurt, right? It's just being able to still power through the moment. And personal motivation can be displayed through self-determination, commitment to positive thinking. That's a key attribute to be able to motivate yourself to get through those tough times, tough conversations, those biases, is just positive thinking. I always, me personally, I like to always see the silver lining. What's the brighter? I don't care what's going on, how bad it is. I always like to think on the positive side of things. And truthfully, I think that keeps me growing, old gracefully. Then the fourth is empathy. It's your ability to understand and share feelings of others in order to respond appropriately. So empathy enables us to have social interactions, collaborate, better understanding each other and our behaviors. And it's truly the cornerstone of social dynamics and ongoing strength of culture within any organization. So empathy enhances communication. You need that, in any situation, especially in a job interview, right? To facilitate transactions when you're being coached, when you are coaching, when you're the mentee or the mentor, in any type of dialogue, engagement, negotiating. There's different opportunities to have empathy and really be able to use it to your advantage. And the final and fifth component of emotional competence is social skills. And that's the ability to connect with others. And this is demonstrated in any social contact by accurately interpreting the emotional intents of others, their jokes, relationships, whatever is going on behind the scenes. It requires active listening. Okay, so active listening is when you're speaking with someone, you're either nodding your head or saying, mm-hmm, yes, but there's something to indicate that to the other person that you hear them. And sometimes it could literally be, I hear you. I heard what you said, or what you said is, and rephrasing. Being emotionally aware and able to express your true feelings is difficult. It requires an ongoing assessment of contextual information and the people you interact with. So this is not just a one-time thing. This is not just a one-time class, if you will. It's something that, you may not just get it from this, presentation. Because it's an ongoing self-evaluation, self-assessment of yourself and others around you. And learning to be honest with ourselves and others in an appropriate manner helps develop overall maturity, character, confidence, and of course, emotional health. Now, we're going to talk a little bit about interviewing and how to apply some of these things that we're talking about, the unconscious bias and emotional intelligence in an interview scenario. And there are many actually examples of unconscious bias, but some of these are some ones that you can actually use to your advantage. So one is called the conformity bias. Conformity is just the tendency for people to act similar to others, regardless of their own personal beliefs or idiosyncrasies. Basically, it's known as peer pressure. So you can actually use that tendency for people to relate to you in an interview situation. There's affinity bias, also known as similarity bias. So that's the tendency for people to have to connect with others because of shared similar interests, experience, and backgrounds. So when you're interviewing, a lot of times that famous questions is usually one of the first questions you receive is, tell me about yourself. Now, if you've done your homework and researched the individual before interviewing with them, you may be able to pick up on some things you have in common. Maybe it might be a school that you guys went to together, at some point in your life. It may be an affiliation. It may be just your career trajectory, anything that you can find that seems to similar to you in your interests, your background experiences. You can use that to your advantage when it comes to unconscious bias, because we have it to your advantage during an interview process. The halo effect, and this is the tendency for people to have to place on another person on a pedestal after learning something impressive about them. So case in point for that is when you're in an interview setting, make sure you do market yourself. Tell them something that is fairly impressive about you. I mean, that's what an interview is really all about. I think people forget that interviewing is not just understanding your skill set, but it's also understanding who you are, your personality. And the last is beauty bias. Beauty bias is a social behavior where people believe that attractive people are just more qualified. And so that goes back to how you present yourself physically, in an interview. So, you want to always put your best foot forward in an interview, and nowadays it's Zoom interviews or phone calls or what have you, but you have to be able to position yourself to present yourself in the best light because of beauty bias. And again, you can use that to your advantage, right? So, for women, we want to make sure men and women, we want to make sure we do our hair, we put makeup on, or we present ourselves in the best light, or make sure if it's just a phone interview, that there's not a lot of noise, it just presents better. So anyways, those are just, again, a few of those unconscious biases that people naturally have. that you can actually use to your benefit during an interview. All right. So this is the interview question time and more of the interaction time. I would love to be able to hear back from you guys. So when it comes to interviewing and trying to answer some of those difficult questions, it's important to know how to answer those interview questions and present yourself in the best light, and give specific examples of your achievements, who you are, show off your personality. So here's a question. Can anyone tell me or answer this, come off mute and answer the question? Tell me about a time you faced an ethical dilemma at work, and how did you deal with it, and what were the results? So before anyone actually answers that, just keep in mind the best way, or some key factors of answering that, is give a specific example. Many of us have actually interviewed folks or have been in an interview, but the best thing you can always do is give an actual specific example that really happened. Again, it shows about your listening skills. Were you actually listening to the question that was asked? And it was, tell me about a time. It's not, well, give me a hypothetical, tell me about a time. So make sure the event is actual. Elaborate on it. Because if you don't elaborate and tell a little bit more about the meat behind the story, and if you are, what's the word, a little elusive about, the details, you don't come off as trustworthy, okay? So be sure it's a dilemma that you feel neutral about at this point, and that, emotions aren't still flared up, because then you may not present yourself in the best light, right? And always provide the positive or what you've learned out of that interaction and experience. All right, so that's going to be the question. Anyone just chime in? Tell me about a time you faced an ethical dilemma at work. How did you deal with it, and what were the results?
I can chime in. This is Dr. Tina. It wasn't in an interview situation, but a time was I was a project manager, and I had a director who wanted me to change the status report because he didn't like the status report because it wasn't going to show a positive light of that project. And anybody know, project managers, we're not here to good or bad, we're here just to tell the story, whatever the story is. So because this was a director that I had to work with on a regular basis, I went to my PMO director, laid out the facts and said, these are the facts and I can't change them. And so I was able to get out of it because I was able to just give the clear facts. She went to that director and said, please tell me what's in this report that's incorrect. And he could not say what was incorrect. Therefore, I was able to uphold my ethical standing that I was not going to give a report that was not correct. And I was able to get past that. But, it's important in your workplaces that if you keep your own ethical truth, that's how you have to stand for it. And once people understand that you're going to hold on to your ground, there's no choice. They either have to take the facts or not. But that's how I was able to get past a ethical situation and get past that.
Excellent. And now I'm curious to know, does anyone have any feedback on the story? Well, Dr. Tina, thank you for sharing tell me about the time you faced an ethical dilemma. Some of the things that I really loved about your example, one, it was a true event that actually happened. And what I liked also about it is you did keep it neutral. You stated the facts. You didn't try to wiggle out of it in a way, but you circumvented the situation. One of the things that I've learned in life is that it's okay to walk away momentarily, that is, because there's times where, people are fighters and some people are not. And in this situation, instead of, going head to head, so to speak, with the person that actually asked you to do something unethical, you found a smarter way to deal with it. And so for me, if I were interviewing you and I heard you, give this example, one, it tells me of who you are, your personality, that one, you're smart, you're resourceful, and that you have high ethical standings. And as a project manager, I think some of those things are actually really important to have. So kudos to you that you were able to deliver yourself and hold yourself true, and you were authentic and genuine in your answer. So thank you for that. I appreciate that. Anyone else want to give this a stab?
I see that Mark in the chat, he mentioned great points on the different biases. Even as a deaf person, I have trouble with disability biases, whether as an applicant or as a leader. Maybe we can even do an example right now for everybody in the room to see how we can move or we can act correctly in the future when it comes to deaf biases as well.
So I see that Mark has unmuted himself and raised his hand. So we can, I think, Beth, you can probably translate for him.
Yep, I could see him. I always have ethical problems at work because myself, I need captions and I also need ASL interpreting to provide the information that I would need. So when we're talking about work, having an event for open public people to join in, you want to make sure that the public has equal access, having the captions and having a sign interpreter and having all of those things if they just want to join in. So for like a manager or a boss to know that they're always willing to accommodate, but HR or the audio visual department, you know, those teams themselves, they don't understand how to make all of that happen, how to make it accessible for at work. So to understand why it's important to include accessibility in the planning and understanding, and helping also with businesses to be able to improve on their community. So so what my experience and my challenge with HR or the AV team is that most of the time their bias is hidden. It's basic. It's like monetarily, right? It's based on money, right? How can I solve this problem? Because it's going to cost me money. So that's something I face a lot. Pose my question.
Wow, that's really deep. And thank you for sharing, Mark. And one of the things that is, you know, apparent and transparent is that biases aren't always apparent and transparent. Sometimes we have, and we, generally speaking, have unconscious biases and don't even have a clue that we have them. And that's part of going back to just even having emotional intelligence to be able to be aware of your shortcomings, how you're feeling, what's going on in the world. So I think it starts with self, and then the belief that everyone should have equal access. To be honest, I'm very pleased to see that there is the captions and a live, and I thought I actually saw 2 people, but maybe I missed I missed it. But to see an interpreter, because for me, when I do different events or host events, that's not always the case. It's actually rare. It's rare. It's a rare find. It's a rare gem. But I think part of it is just speaking up and letting people be aware of their shortcomings in an intelligent, manner, which is what you just did, actually. Anyone else have some thoughts or want to respond to Mark?
I do. Oh, Elizabeth.
Go ahead, Monica.
Okay. Well, no, I think this is why these conversations are important, right? So there's 13 people in the Zoom room. We need to be the ones on the front line educating our community, or even when we're attending virtual events, you know, although we can hear, let's be the change where it's like, hey, please turn on live transcriptions. How are you breaking the barrier of unconscious bias? Like 13 times 3, that's already what, 39? Now we've impacted 39 lives. So, you know, I appreciate Mark for sharing this. And Darnelle, you're open to take the lead here too. And Elizabeth, you can step in. I just wanted to say that.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll take Elizabeth and then we'll continue. Go ahead.
I was just going to say that part of the reason why this event has live interpreters is because Mark reached out to me and said, I need an interpreter. I was under the mistaken impression that captions were enough. And Mark educated me on why the interpreters were needed. So that was really helpful for me because I was not aware that both were needed. And, you know, sometimes, you know, when we're put in those situations, you know, our anxiety about, you know, what are people going to think about me? Are they going to be receptive to what I'm presenting? You know, it may hold us back. And the reality is you don't know how people are going to react until you try. And if you're using your emotional intelligence skills to present your information in the kindest, best way that you can, more often than not, the response that you will get will be a positive one. So we shouldn't be afraid to stand up for what I mean, if you're doing it in a way that ends up being offensive to everyone else, then you're actually in the wrong, even though your message may be right. So I appreciate what you're sharing with us, Darnelle, because you know, emotional intelligence is so incredibly important to, you know, succeeding in our careers.
100%. And thank you, Elizabeth, for being transparent with you know, your own experience and you know, being blindsided. We all have blind spots, but and that shows your level of high emotional intelligence to be able to speak, you know, firmly and with compassion, because that is part of emotional intelligence. You spoke with compassion and intelligence in regards to the situation with Mark. So thank you both for sharing. All three of you, actually. Thank you for sharing. All right, so let's get back to sharing my
Mark said,
screen.
thank you, wonderful.
What was that? I'm sorry?
Mark said, thank you, wonderful. He was happy, waving hands.
Awesome. All right, let's see. All right, excellent. There we go. So emotions are derived from 5 core feelings: happiness, shame, sadness, anger, fear. And, you know, there's obviously many derivatives from those basic core feelings of emotions. But you can use your emotions to facilitate your thinking. So how you feel determines how you view the situation, right? So if you're feeling embarrassed about a situation, well, you're going to view it in a negative light. Or you can use, instead of being embarrassed, and the more appropriate, I guess, appropriate viewpoint would be of a intrigue, you know, about the situation. So you can actually control your emotions and determine how to feel about that before, where, you know, I always look on the brighter side of things, and I always seek to understand what am I to learn from this situation, because, you know, being selfish, it just helps me to be a better person. It helps me to grow and expand my bandwidth when it comes to emotional intelligence and understanding. You could choose to be in a good mood. You know, oftentimes we hear, oh, you must have woke up on the wrong side of the bed. It's a choice. You could choose to be happy when you get up from the bed, and by doing the simple things of just you know, doing the gratification journal, you know, or just saying one thing about your life that makes you happy, just anything that can get you to that good mood. But it all starts with just your emotions and how you view things, your perception of things. So enhancing your communication skills, accurately perceive emotions. Words are a small part of the message, but it's also about body language. It's also about those nonverbal cues. It's listening for the tone of your voice. It's recognizing your emotions, focusing on the message. You know, one quick example of mine, it may be silly, but it's really true. I did not realize that until someone asked me years ago, what's wrong? The question was, what's wrong with you? And I'm like, what are you talking about? And the response was, well, your hands are crossed, you know, and I had the horrible habit, I guess, of always crossing my hands like this. I don't know if you guys can see, you know, my bodice and up, but I always crossed my hands. And I did not realize that that was nonverbal cues, that it appeared that I was not open, or I was standoffish or angry. But the truth of the matter is, I get cold easily. I get very cold easily. And so I always did that basically to warm myself up, not because I was closed or anything of that nature. So what I learned from that is to always carry a jacket. So that's one of the things, you know, just a small, you know, thing that I've learned and gone through. But I always carry a jacket no matter where I go, because I don't know if it's going to be cold or not, but I'm not into the conversation. So it's amazing. Say it can really impact someone's emotion or even your own emotions. To create that very first impression is powerful, right? Impactful to that very first impression. Remember that people will pick up on your emotion, regardless of the words you speak. So if I ask you how you're doing today, you're like, I'm fine. Tone, or did you smile when you say that? You know, so you have around you. It's imperative that your words are congruent with your body language and the tone of your voice. Y and Z, and you roll your eyes and say, oh, I'm feeling great about it. No, that doesn't match what you say and what your body language just did. So, you know, again, all of that is just part of emotional intelligence. And the key word, I keep saying it, is just be aware. And in order to be aware, sometimes you just got to slow down and ask yourself, what am I going through? What am I thinking? Managing your emotions during conversations. This requires, I can't see that word, conscious effort, I think is what I wrote there. It requires a very conscious effort. Now, remember I said that earlier, it's not, you know, you're going to get it right away. I mean, you may, because you're smart that way, but it's a conscious effort because it's conscious practice all the time. And you have to actively task yourself to listen and engage and be present in the conversation. Utilize your emotions in order to fully receive everything the other person is trying to communicate. Active listening. So one of the things that you do want to do when you're trying to demonstrate that, especially again, thinking about in an interview situation or any conversation, is to try to use minimal encouragers. And encouragers, when I say that, is the the yes, gotcha, you know. Someone brought that to me, I would say gotcha a lot. And I'm like, well, I got it though. That's what my response is. Well, like, I got it. But it was just interesting conversation we ended up having after that about, you know, it showed my age, I guess. I guess there's a particular age group that says gotcha. But use, because it can be distracting, you know, to say, Have you ever talked to someone and every second, and it's like, are you actually really listening to me, or are you just saying and you're not, you know, kind of like that husband or wife that and it's like, wait, are you actually listening to me right now, or are you just saying that to give me the impression you're listening, but you're not. So it can be very distracting. So use minimal encouragers. Repeat the key phrases that you've heard. Now, did I hear you say, oh, what I understand you saying is paraphrase, summarize the speaker's key points, offer empathy, but be sure it's genuine. Stay in the moment and listen fully. Pay attention to the tone of the voice, the nonverbal cues, the emotional intent, and ask engaging questions to validate what you're hearing and further engage the speaker. I'm going to stop there just for a second because one of the things I do want to point out is my screen right now. The only thing that I can see is my screen that I'm sharing. So if anyone is making a comment or asking a question, I can't see that. So I want to just pause for a second to see if anyone has any questions or want to make a comment. Okay, I guess I'm good to continue then.
Darnelle, actually, I wanted to highlight what's going on in the chat for those who will see the recording. So Mark mentioned, I have a hard problem with facial expression because when I pay attention to the person communicating with me, it requires extra mental effort that makes me look like I'm not being pleasant. Yes, that it does take a conscious effort to remember to look pleasant in conversation instead of looking like the Hulk with a smile. So yeah, I mean, that's definitely, I've never heard that. So that's interesting and good to know for the audience. And then Elizabeth mentioned there is a reason why we hear so much about the importance of having a diverse network. When we get to know people who are different from us, the similarity bias that Darnelle mentioned comes into play. We start seeing what we have in common instead of what is different. Thank you, Mark, for educating me in being part of my network.
Awesome.
And then Raphael, like he loved the discussion and insight, which I second that as well.
Love it. Love it. I love it. Go ahead.
I also want to mention that, you know, with regards to Mark's comment about his facial expressions, we do recognize like people with neurodiversity, say autism or stuff like that, they do also lack the ability to have, you know, some of the social cues that we're used to. And I think it's good for all of us to understand that if somebody's not giving us the social cues that we're expecting, you know, instead of immediately becoming offended, like think about it, like, is there something else that I don't know? Like, could they, you know, be on the spectrum, or, you know, could they have a hard time hearing like Mark? Is there something else that we're not seeing? And I see that Mark raised his hand, so Tammy could interpret for him.
Yeah, I just wanted to expand a little bit on that comment that Elizabeth had made. That, for example, one thing that I often experience in the deaf community is we do have many diverse people involved in the deaf community with additional disabilities, autism being one of them. And sometimes, or someone may ask something, something over and over and over, and somebody may say, "Are you okay?" But maybe because of their facial expression that they're making. So, and sometimes they focus on maybe they're focusing on understanding the message of the conversation. Other times it could be more of not having, or maybe they're just processing the message. So that expression may look like they're blank instead of showing, hi, hello, smiling, something like that. So that's why I love having an interpreter, because they can show my emotion and my inflection through, and my tone through interpretation. So for me, having to focus more on the message itself is what it's about. And helping people become more open-minded, and, you know, to make sure everything is okay when during the conversation. That's all.
I love that. And Mark, I share that with you as far as the quote unquote unpleasant facial expression. I still get it. And this is something I work on all the time, because for me, I do want to always make sure, at least I try my best to understand, it's what you said, understand or focus on the message. Because so often where someone is communicating, but for me, I'm paying attention to what is being said, what is not being said, the body language, what's implied, because sometimes we think we said something, but it's perceived totally different. So I actually share that frustration with you, because I've been told, what's wrong? Like, why you look angry? And it's like, no, I'm concentrating on what you're saying. And I have to just explain that. Oh man, I'm really focusing on this person very strenuously. I will stop and say, by the way, this look, just to let you know, I'm really focusing on what you're saying. So sometimes even in the midst of our interaction, it's important to educate the other person or people about whatever's going on. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
My pleasure. All right, so, man, time is just escaping us. I can't believe we have about 10 minutes left, and I have so much to share. I'm actually going to share my screen again, and forgive me, but I will try to go a little quicker through some of the slides. I will skip some of the slides just because there's so much great content. One of the things you want to be able to always do, and these are just little tricks of the trade. I've been hiring and interviewing for quite some time. When it comes to building rapport and engaging with individuals, use people's names, refer to them by their name. As we're speaking to Michael, address Michael, whoever you're speaking to, every now and then use their name. It's important. Right? I mean, at the end of the day, that's all you really have is your name and your reputation. When you're using the we language, it's all inclusive. Okay, so we share that in common. We are a community. It's very communal. So it shares this bond when you use the we language, and be honest and genuine. One of the things that it's great to do is to speak at an even pace in a lower tone. Now, the key trick about speaking at an even pace is not everyone appreciates that. So one of my tidbits actually is when you're building rapport with someone, especially in an interview or any situation, honestly, is to try to match your pace with that speaker's pace. Again, it's just about having that similarity, sharing something in common, so that that person that you're communicating with tends to kind of open up, like, oh, again, that unconscious bias, oh, we have something in common. This person can keep up with me, or they, keep up with me in the slowness of the pace. Be attentive to silence. Prolonged silence can be uncomfortable, but doesn't mean it's not okay. So silence is okay. Show agreement when you genuinely agree, the head nod, right? The yes, gotcha. And show disagreement in a kind but considerate, way. I just had a conversation the other day with my supervisor, and I was sharing an insight that I had, and she said to me, I respectfully disagree. And we continued the conversation, and it was great. And she wasn't like, oh, that's not right, or no, didn't get it all up in arms. It's, I respectfully disagree. And then we continued the conversation as to, what our thoughts are about the subject matter. So it's always about being polite, and caring. Again, I like what you said earlier. I'm going to keep using that, Michael, is the genuine message, right? Focusing on the message. All right, here's another interview question. Tell me about a time someone criticized your work, and how did you respond, and what did you learn? And so I'm not going to open this up because of time, but again, the whole thing is to be specific in your example, be clear, not ambiguous. Again, do not show any negative feelings against the example you're giving, because it just sheds a negative light on yourself. And then always, always, always speak about and articulate what you learned out of the interaction and the positive outcome that it provided for you. We talked about just now body language. It's an important part of communication. Be aware of it. Actions do speak louder than words. And then we know it's not what you say, it's how you say it. It's in your tone, it's in your pitch, it's in your body language, it's in your eye contact. You know, you can easily see if someone's disinterested simply if they're just not looking at you, you know, or if they, you know, do that type of thing. So be aware of it, and so that you don't do it and you're able to self-manage. So I'm going to skip through some of these boxes. So mindfulness is, again, it's just being present in the moment. It's just simply put, pay attention, right? Stop and pay attention to what's going on. Stop and pay attention to the conversation. So I'll be transparent, right? Because now that I understand that we have someone that needs an interpreter, and now I know that I can't just assume someone's going to stop and speak, right? So now I have to intentionally stop myself, say, okay, let me check to see if anyone has any questions, or because I'm not looking at the chat box. I'm not able to see the chat box. So sometimes we have to just stop ourselves, pay attention, and recognize what's going on, so that we can, you know, self-medicate and move forward accordingly. So recognize your emotional responses, name them. We talked about having that emotional vocabulary. I'm feeling angry. Well, why am I feeling angry? I'm feeling angry because X, Y, Z, you know, and you'll be able to get out that funk if it's a negative feeling that you're having, you know. I'm wondering how many of you have shared this experience with me, where you've had this negative, you had an event and it's a bad event in your day. And by the time you tell your best friend, and you tell your sister, and you tell your mom, and you tell your husband, by the time you tell your cousin, the emotion that you have from the first time you told it is almost completely gone, because you told it so many times. And what that is because you were able to actually process it so many times. So mindfulness is no different. All right. So paying attention, recognizing it, naming the emotion, accepting it, exploring it, because that's what you're doing when you're venting to so many different people, and then allowing the emotion to finally just dissipate. So when you find yourself in facing a stressful situation, the skill of being mindfulness become even more important, right? And to understand what you're going through, what you're facing, and then to be able to let it go, okay? It's quite important. Remember that stress is relative to the circumstance, the individual, and the individual's interpretation of the context. It's essential to being in the moment, be patient, mindful, meaning pay attention, focus, calm, and keep an open mind about the options available to you. Truly important. Just keep an open mind. And one of the things I said before is try to look on the brighter side of things. Try to understand the person's perspective. It's also important to remember that you can't ultimately control the environment around you or the choices made by others, but you can control how you respond to different stimuli. So apply optimism, and I think we're wrapping up here because I don't think I have many more slides. Apply optimism, apply optimism, apply optimism. See things on a positive spin. If you ever wonder why does certain people, they always just seem so happy, it's not because they're truly happy, nothing bad ever happens to them. It's because they tend to see things on a positive spin so that they are productive, so they have general good health. Look past the current problem, see the bigger picture, see the possibilities in the option. One of the things that I remember talking about, I don't know, last year, it was a video that we saw. I don't know if anyone have seen this video. It's called, It's Not About the Nail, right? So there's literally a nail, fake nail, like a hammer nail, stuck to this young woman's forehead, and she's complaining. And everyone she's complaining to, they're like, but all you have to do is just take out the nail. Maybe that's what's giving you the headache. And for her, it's like, it's not about the nail, it's about everything else, So it's all about just trying to see the positive spin, having being in the moment, listening to those verbal and non-verbal cues, and looking past the current problem, and apply optimism. And control pessimism on the flip side, because pessimism can be very detrimental. It generally lowers morale. If it's unchecked, it can heighten stress, and you should consciously choose to look for the positive. So, and to wrap up, hopefully we've been able to identify and define and identify emotional intelligence, gain some better understanding of how to control your behavior under duress by simply being aware. Take the time to slow down, be aware of what you're feeling, what you're thinking, name it, right? Name it that you're angry, name it that you're confused, name that you're ashamed, name it, let it process, all right? Be in the feelings, be in your feelings, and then talk it through and be able to let it go so that you can change your outlook and change your behavior towards whatever that situation is. Learn how to face those unconscious biasness. It goes back to being aware. Be aware that we have blind spots, and that you're not the only person that has a blind spot, but others have blind spots as well. And demonstrate your emotional intelligence in an interview setting. Show who you are. If you don't remember anything else, is in an interview setting, it's not just your skills that someone is interviewing for. It's about your personality. Show your kindness, show your thoughtfulness, show your ingenuity, show your initiative, show all those things that make you who you are. Because at the end of the day, if someone reads your resume and they call you in for the interview, it's because they think you can do the job, because it's already there in black and white. Typically, the reason you get hired was, one, because someone connected with you. You were able to get someone to connect with you. They think they like you. They think you can do the job, and they think they'll like working with you. And that's all I have.
Well, thank you so much, Darnelle. It's great to have you, and hopefully we can have this presentation for the group. So we actually have another workshop right at 11. I have some people in the waiting room. So if you want to just close us out here, and whoever wants to stay on for our next one, feel free to do that as well.
Thank you so very much for having me. I appreciate you guys. Have a beautiful, wonderful day.
Thank you, Darnelle. You did amazing.
Thank you. Take care, guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, everyone.
How are you?
Can you guys hear me okay?
Just give me 1 second, please.
Oh, no worries.